On October 13th, investors gathered at Zhongrong International Trust, Hangzhou branch, demanding answers and their money back. The situation became tense, and the general manager called the police to disperse the crowd. Zhongrong International Trust is a state-owned company and has not issued any statements or provided explanations since it halted redemptions and payments on products totaling nearly 400 billion yuan, affecting approximately 70,000 investors. These investors have been banned from petitioning at the Beijing headquarters. As China's economic downturn continues, both the working class and middle class are facing pay cuts, unemployment, and even bankruptcy. Dissatisfaction and protests related to economic struggles are on the rise, posing potential challenges to the CCP's authority. Many apartment buildings in China are sold before they are even completed. With continuous delays in delivery, the number of unfinished buildings is growing. This flawed system has turned many ordinary people into victims, with their dream homes evaporating. Many homeowners are now taking to the streets to defend their rights. On October 8th, in Anhua County, Hunan Province, owners of unfinished Evergrande properties protested outside the government building holding banners. On the same day, in Leshan, Sichuan Province, owners of the unfinished buildings protested, with video footage showing a female protester being manhandled by the developer's representative. China's economic struggles have also led to a surge in wave of disputes and protests. On October 2nd, workers protested outside the Marquis Hotel in Meishan, Sichuan Province, demanding unpaid wages. On October 19th, employees of the Shentao supermarket chain gathered outside the Shentao daily headquarters, demanding 6 months of unpaid wages. This supermarket chain, once the largest in Zhenghan Plain, declared bankruptcy in early April 2024, closing hundreds of stores across multiple cities. From September 20th to the 23rd, sanitation workers in Xinjiang City, Sichuan Province, went on strike due to unpaid wages, leaving garbage piled up across the city. On August 31st, workers in Shenzhen, employed by J&T Express, went on strike over unpaid wages, blocking warehouse entrances with trucks to prevent further business operations. On August 27th, teachers in Xi'an protested outside the local education bureau over unpaid wages. On August 27th, residents of Songkou town in Fujian province protested over unresolved resettlement issues stemming from a 2017 highway construction project. The temporary housing they were placed in has now become unsafe to live in. In addition to housing issues, China's banking sector has also triggered protests. From August 27th to the 29th, customers in Guxi County, Hunan Province, shared videos claiming they were unable to withdraw their money from the agricultural bank. One depositor said the bank took their savings and used them for real estate projects. When the developers went bankrupt, their money disappeared. The bank refuses to acknowledge this, and they can't win in court. Protests are spreading across China as dissatisfaction among the population continues to grow. Despite the Chinese National Day holiday, many Chinese citizens are filled with a sense of helplessness and pessimism about the future, with some even saying, the country's fortune feels cursed. Have you been following the news lately? Can you believe that in just the first 10 months of 2024, 210,000 people in China have taken their own lives due to overwhelming debt? For years now, people have been burdened by issues like education, healthcare, car loans, mortgages, and employment. On top of that, debt collectors are constantly bombarding them with calls and messages, pushing them to their breaking point. How can anyone endure this kind of pressure? Many people struggling with debt try to cover one loan with another, but in the end, debt becomes like a vampire, slowly draining them dry. Eventually, some just can't cope anymore and choose to give up entirely. While those with a stronger mindset may decide to lie flat and stop trying, others choose a more tragic option. But are these problems purely individual? Currently, 400 million people across China are overdue on their debts. Is this really their fault, or does it demand serious reflection? There are growing calls for the government to step in and address these heartbreaking issues. Many former business owners are overwhelmed by bankruptcy and saddled with debts, and some have even ended up on the debt defaulters blacklist.
我感觉我快要活不下去了。
I feel like I can't go on anymore. I'm 34 years old and buried under over 4.6 million yuan in debt. Ever since my debt crisis hit, I've been bombarded with countless debt collection calls and legal notices. The pressure has been unbearable, and I've had to humble myself to beg so-called relatives and friends for help. But can you imagine? I couldn't even borrow a few hundred yuan for basic living expenses. No one is willing to help me. Without money, my bank cards were frozen and my Alipay account was restricted. Now, even meeting basic needs has become a struggle. My wife left me because of the massive debt, and I've truly experienced what it means to be abandoned by everyone. Every night, I'm consumed by fear, helplessness, and despair. I've even thought about ending it all, but then I think about my elderly parents and my young children. What would happen to them? That thought is the only thing that is keeping me going. Data released by CEIC, a Hong Kong-based economic data company, shows that as of January 2024, Chinese household debt has exceeded 11 trillion US dollars. This marks a 50% increase compared to 5 years ago. Additionally, over 8.3 million individuals, around 1% of the country's working population, are now classified as debt defaulters. Economic experts told Voice of America the main drivers behind this surge are mortgages and changing consumer habits. However, they also pointed out the government policies, which prioritize production while neglecting consumers and residents, are partly to blame. Aside from mounting debt, many young Chinese are losing hope for the future. According to Radio Free Asia, a Chinese student named Tom, studying abroad, shared that the intense competition and inadequate social distribution in China have made it difficult for even top-tier graduates to find jobs. This has left many feeling pessimistic about their prospects. Tom explained that the current economic climate in China is poor, with shrinking markets and opportunities. Young people without family connections struggle to compete with the privileged children of officials. As a result, an increasing number of overseas students like him are choosing not to return to China, instead seeking better opportunities and fairer markets abroad. Since China implemented its pandemic lockdown policies, the country's economy has stagnated, leading to a sharp decline in public confidence. Waves of business closures, layoffs, wage cuts, and unpaid salaries, along with exodus of foreign investments, have spread across the nation. The hardest hit have been those at the bottom of the economic ladder, with the restaurant industry, one of the main avenues of investment and employment for ordinary citizens, seeing widespread losses and closures. According to a leading Chinese social media platform for the restaurant industry, China saw 1.36 million restaurant businesses either revoked or deregistered in 2023. Alarmingly, the first half of 2024 is already nearing that figure. Beijing Statistics Bureau reports that profits in the city's restaurant industry for businesses earning over 10 million yuan annually dropped by 89% in the first half of 2024, with profit margins falling to just 0.37%. Once considered symbols of high income, white-collar workers are now facing pay cuts and layoffs at an unprecedented scale. According to reports, 41 listed banks on the A-shares market saw their employee numbers drop by over 42,600 in the first half of this year, with more than 70% of those banks reducing staff. Cumulatively, employee salaries across 42 banks fell by nearly 700 million yuan, and over 70% of employees at these listed banks saw their average monthly salaries shrink. The consumer tech industry is also in deep trouble. According to data compiled by Bloomberg, major tech firms like Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent have collectively cut over 63,000 jobs since the Chinese government began cracking down on the internet industry. The 2023 Workplace Insights report revealed that average recruitment salaries in the digital tech industry dropped by 7%, with technical roles seeing a 12% decrease and design positions falling by 18%. Beijing white-collar worker Zhou Fei works as a translator and bluntly stated that he and his friends believe the country's fortune feels doomed. He explained that this sentiment stems from the overall unpredictability of the economy. This pessimism is also reflected in broader data. A study led by Harvard professor Martin White and Stanford professor Scott Rosell, in collaboration with Chinese academics, found that over the past 20 years, Chinese citizens' views on the economy have shifted dramatically. Especially since Xi Jinping took office, the public has become increasingly pessimistic. Back in 2004, nearly 60% of respondents felt their household's financial situation had improved compared to 5 years prior and were optimistic about the next 5 years. By 2014, when Xi Jinping came into office, those numbers climbed to 76% and 73%, respectively. However, by 2023, only 39% felt their economic situation had improved, and those who were optimistic about the future dropped to 47%, marking a 26% decline from the 2014 peak. The percentage of people feeling pessimistic about the future rose from 2.3% in 2004 to 16% in 2023. This research was conducted in 2004, 2009, 2014, and 2023, surveying a nationally representative sample of people aged 20 to 60, though Tibet and Xinjiang were excluded. Sample sizes ranged from 3,000 to 7,500, and consistent questions were used across the years to ensure comparability. Meanwhile, data from Freedom's House China Dissent Monitor indicates that protests in China during the second quarter of 2024 increased by 18% compared to the same period last year. Kevin Slatton, editor of the China Dissent Monitor, stated that at least 3/4 of recorded cases are due to economic dissatisfaction. Since June 2022, the China Dissent Monitor has recorded nearly 6,400 protest incidents. They have observed a rise in protests led by rural residents and blue-collar workers, particularly over land seizures and low wages. Notably, the middle class has also organized protests, largely in response to the ongoing real estate crisis, with protests by property owners and construction workers making up 44% of cases across 370 cities. Researcher at the Taiwan Cross-Strait Policy Association, Wu Sizi, emphasized that these social protests indicate that people's tolerance has reached a breaking point. He added that international monitoring of China is limited, and the data published by Freedom House is likely just the tip of the iceberg. Wu commented that for years, the international community has monitored internal protests in China, but the reported figures are often far lower than the actual numbers. International investigations typically reveal only about 20% of the reality. He explained that China can block information, and the true figures are likely much higher and more complex. Wu also pointed out that China's current fiscal problems are severe, and relying solely on economic improvements to ease public dissent is unlikely to work. He noted that this was a common method during better times, but today the government has fewer tools at its disposal due to the worsening economic situation. The involvement of the middle class in protests is an important signal and could potentially destabilize the Chinese government. According to Voice of America, Tseng Chen-yuen, chairman of the board of New School for Democracy, stated that the biggest beneficiaries of China's economic reforms have been the middle class, who the CCP refers to as national capitalists. For decades, this group has tolerated communist rule, fearing a return to the political instability that would threaten their wealth. However, with the middle class now accounting for 1/5 of all protests, their awareness of personal rights is rising, so they are demanding rule of law, transparency, and fairness. Tseng explained that in the past, China's middle class enjoyed the benefits of rapid economic growth and did not challenge the CCP's rule. However, due to Xi Jinping's missteps and the resulting competition with the US, coupled with the reformation of a new Cold War, China's economy has suffered significantly. The middle class is now forced to speak out and expects the government to adjust its policies. If the CCP fails to respond to their demands, the internal stability of the Communist Party may begin to erode. So, what has caused the widespread pessimism and dissatisfaction among the Chinese people? Analysts believe that the CCP's mismanagement over the past decade is a direct cause of the country's economic woes. Political commentator Fang Yuan told Radio Free Asia that the top-level economic planning in China has gone astray in recent years, causing the country to lose momentum and fall into economic decline. People find it difficult to plan for the future in an environment where policies change so frequently, crushing any optimism. Professor Xie Tian from the University of South Carolina, Aiken, added that the post-pandemic reality has shown that China's economic honeymoon of continual growth is over. With the bursting of the real estate bubble and a rapid shrinkage in national wealth, the fantasy of continuous economic growth has collapsed. One of the key debates surrounding China's economic future is whether China will follow in Japan's footsteps and experience a prolonged economic stagnation lasting 30 years. Takeshi Ninami, CEO of Japanese beverage manufacturer Suntory, told Yahoo Finance that, "We are now at a turning point for China." He warned that China may soon face the same fate as Japan, which has struggled with decades of deflation. Ninami stated that China's deflation is eerily similar to what Japan went through. The key issue is that people have money, but they don't want to spend it, and there's overproduction. Japan's economic bubble burst in the early 1990s, leading to more than 3 decades of deflation, with even near-zero interest rates failing to stimulate growth. Earlier this year, Ninami published an op-ed in the Financial Times describing deflation as an invisible monster. Recently, however, Japan's economy has shown signs of recovery, with GDP growing by 0.8% in the second quarter on the back of improved consumer spending. Meanwhile, China is facing unprecedented economic pressure driven by weak consumption, declining corporate profits, falling real estate prices, shrinking local government revenues, rising youth unemployment, an aging population, and an undeveloped social security system. The year-end accounting pressures could also trigger a wave of defaults. The biggest issue is China's weak consumer spending, with consumers reluctant to make purchases or take out loans. China's second quarter GDP grew by 4.7%, falling short of the expected 5.1%. Looking ahead, China's economy is expected to continue slowing down. A recent expert survey conducted by Reuters confirmed this outlook, predicting that China's economic growth for 2024 will likely be 4.8%, below the government's target. Growth is expected to slow further to 4.5% in 2025, leaving the Chinese people even more pessimistic about the future.